Here's where I really struggle with all of this, okay? If I am a father and I lose my child,
Yeah.
I don't know how I ever work through that. You can tell me these are the 5 stages of bereavement and grief, and you can tell me I need to go see a therapist and I need to work through my depression and da-da-da-da. I don't see how I could ever get through that.
Yep.
For someone experiencing situational depression and bereavement and grief, what are some common feelings or symptoms that they would be experiencing?
Well, oftentimes they start to regret certain things that they did or didn't get to do when the person was alive. I think that's a normal thing. Obviously, if it goes on persistently and you have a hard time not blaming yourself and just can't be convinced otherwise, then it might mean that you might need some professional support. People can feel really sad, describe that they feel empty inside, feels kind of numb. Sometimes they're more irritable. They may disengage a bit and isolate. They just kind of don't want to talk to people, don't want to talk about it, don't want any reminders. And oftentimes they will take a break from their usual routine. So they might not be as active as they once was, or they'll go to work, but they feel like they're just going through the motions. They usually go to sleep at a certain time. Now they're going to sleep much earlier or much later. And so you'll find sort of these types of disruptions to routine. And again, for most people, it's temporary or it kind of comes in waves, but it can persist much longer than that for some individuals, to the point where they can't get out of bed. And I think that's also another sign that perhaps it's time to look for professional help.
Yeah, and a sign that this might not just be a situational depression, and it could have now morphed into this full-blown clinical depression.
Right.
Yeah. Those are all pretty signs that people go, okay, that seems normal for the situation. But are there things that could happen or symptoms that people could be experiencing that aren't healthy and they shouldn't be? Like, this is not normal and you need to seek help immediately?
Well, oftentimes people will look to avoidance strategies, and a little bit of it is okay. I think that is even normal and expected, like trying to sleep as a way to take a break from those feelings, probably in more damaging ways, really relying on alcohol or drugs possibly to numb that pain. So I think when those things become more persistent, or you notice that like your drinking has just gotten so much worse, using more and more every day, then that's something that you might look for professional support with. When people start to feel like they don't care about their own lives, and perhaps they even want to hurt themselves or kill themselves, take their own lives, that obviously is a huge point of concern that they need to get professional help with. And I think if you just can't carry on your activities of daily living anymore, you stop showering, you don't want to get dressed, you don't want to get out of bed, you can't do daily chores, you can't go to work, that again is another sign when this is more severe. You might need to get some more help.
Well, Dr. Ho and I sat down in a separate series to talk about the relationship between substance abuse and depression. Unfortunately, very common. Take a look at this.
When people medicate through marijuana, alcohol, methamphetamines, what happens is over time, your brain actually starts to produce less and less of dopamine. That's the reward neurotransmitter that makes you feel good, that makes you feel happy. And the reason why the brain starts to produce less is because every time you jolt it with a substance or alcohol, it's getting too much. So your brain is down-regulating itself and saying, let's bring this to more of a balanced state. Well, once you take the alcohol away or the drugs away, your natural levels of dopamine are now much lower than they were when you started. And that's why the beginning phases of sobriety are so hard for people, because your brain does eventually heal itself, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And those first few weeks, you feel awful. You could feel so depressed, and you didn't even realize how depressed you were.
Here's where I really struggle with all of this, okay? If I am a father and I lose my child,
Yeah.
I don't know how I ever work through that. You can tell me these are the 5 stages of bereavement and grief, and you can tell me I need to go see a therapist and I need to work through my depression and da-da-da-da. I don't see how I could ever get through that.
Yep. And I think accepting that you can't get through it is a big part of it. You don't have to necessarily stop grieving somebody. I think that people think, oh, I have to get over this. I have to get over this. That actually, that fight, that resistance actually makes it harder to get over anyway. But I always tell people, my view about grief is that it can come and go, and it's like an ever changing process. And I don't think there's a necessarily stop point to grief. And when I experience personally grief, and I have a reaction to something that I lost, and I cry, I actually remember like how much I love the person. And actually to me, it's very comforting that years after I lose somebody, I can look at a picture and still cry about them, that they were very meaningful to me, And so I think we have to stop fighting it as if it's like this pathological thing we have to get away from. I think grief is something that's natural, it's normal, and it shows you how much you've cared about a person.
If you like psychology and learning about mental health and want to learn more while meeting other people who are interested, explore your membership options using the link below this video or visit medcircle.com.
This idea of acceptance has come up a few times already in this series where, all right, you are a parent. You did experience the worst thing a parent can ever go through, losing their child, and you won't ever get over that.
Yeah.
You're never going to go, well, that happened, but now I'm thriving. It's going to be something that's with you. And that, you're saying, that acceptance of that is okay.
It's helpful because otherwise you're judging yourself, in some ways, like, why haven't I gotten over it yet? Should I be getting over it? Or getting angry when people say, well, it's been X number of years, and then you have this big reaction, the visceral reaction, like, well, you haven't lost a child before. You have no idea what that feels like, right? I mean, if you just let go of all of those notions and just say grief is normal, it's ever changing, it can be around forever, and that's okay, that's fine. I think it helps. It helps to just acknowledge that can be an outcome.
Yeah, in the psychiatry world, I hear the word acceptance a lot.
Yeah.
Like we have our great series on acceptance and commitment therapy. And then on the more like wellness spiritual side, I think it's a similar concept, but they use the word surrender.
Yeah.
Right? Like surrender, just surrender to it.
Yeah.
It's outside of your control anyway. Yeah. And you're gonna feel like this, and you're gonna feel like this, and that brings a lot of comfort to me, and I know a lot of other people, to know that that's an option.
Yeah, the verbiage of surrender versus acceptance, I think it depends on who you are and what feels good to you.
Yeah.
Surrender feels more passive, like, okay, I'll just let it happen to me. Some people are okay with that.
Right.
Acceptance feels much more proactive. Like, I am going to take a step and accept it myself.
Ooh, good.
And so I think some people who love control probably like the word acceptance better. People who are like kind of okay with like, I'm cool, I'm a little bit more laid back, maybe they like the word surrender better. But I think we're all talking about the same dimension of a concept. You know what? It's out of your control.
Yeah.
And the fact is you couldn't control this person dying, and you can't control your feelings about it either.
Yeah.
And just letting that be.
Yeah.
That's hard to do, but
it's really hard to do.
Yeah. But it's great to talk about it.
But doable nonetheless.
It is doable. Yeah. And I think when you accept it, it becomes much more of like it can be a very beautiful moment in some ways when you have these sort of moments of grief, like, oh, like I still miss grandma, or whatever that is. I think that can be a very like healing thing for some people once they've accepted it.
For people who go through all those stages and then start to live their new normal, a life without that person or without that job or without that pet, how do they know they've reached that new normal? What does that feel like?
Well, I think the new normal will always be that you miss the person from time to time. You're going to go about your tasks of daily living, and places in which or times in which you would have been doing something with that person, you're going to think about them. But I know a lot of people who, for them, their new normal is that they just reflect on those rituals, those times a little bit more. So they're a little bit more contemplative when they get to that part of the day. Oh, this is when I used to have coffee with my husband. And they just develop a new routine. They might have coffee with a friend. They may still keep it to themselves, but during that time they read. And it's sort of this idea of having a transformative stage of like what you do in your daily life without that person, but it's not always riddled with sadness. You find new ways of meaning to infuse into those moments of your life. A
lot of people feel guilty when they do that.
Yeah, yes, people do go through that.
I'm getting on with my life without this thing or this person. That survivor's guilt.
Yeah, the whole survivor's guilt. And that's a big deal here. And I think individuals, who deal with that, sometimes what I advise them to do is, try to put yourself in your loved one's shoes? Like, would they want you to be crying every single day when you're having coffee? Or would they want you to keep enjoying the ritual and just remember that they were there with you at one time, you know,
Yeah.
and trying to like put them into the other person's shoes. You know, I think sometimes it's hard. We lose sight of that. And again, the why me? Why? How come I survived but they didn't?
Or what could I have done
Yeah.
better
Yeah.
to keep? Because this isn't just loss of a person.
Yeah.
It can be, what could I have done to keep my pet healthier or more safe? Or what could I have done to kept that job just a little bit longer, or stayed in
Right.
that city, or whatever that is.
Right, exactly. And I think you, again, have to let go of that control, because it's all control. You know, asking those questions of why. It's because you can't understand it and you need to, but maybe
good.
you don't need to.
So good. That was the first question in the first session of this. Why did this happen?
Why?
That is
Yeah.
all coming from a space of control.
Yeah.
And we have to be aware of why we're asking ourselves these questions. Is it coming from a space of grief, bereavement, going through the stages, normal, healthy coping? Or is it coming from a space of unrealistic control that you'll never have?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And this leads to a dead end.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that people have to sort of, again, like try their best to let go of that notion that they have to understand everything, that they have to control how their grief is going. It's just going to happen the way it's going to happen, and you do have to accept or surrender to the fact that you won't know exactly what turn it's going to take.